Earlier this year, I attended the ICANN forum in Paris. I heard Setsuko Thurlow's testimony as a survivor of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. It was really one of the oh, sorry, it was really one of the most powerful and moving moments of my life, and I'm sure every single young person there in that room and the people watching it online felt the exact same. I was just wondering why you think that their stories, the survivor stories, resonate with young people so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've really tried through ICANN, and then like our partners have done that as well. I know SCND, Scottish CND has done that a lot, is to make sure that the voices of the survivors are kind of up front and kind of also the basis of everything that we do. And I think, you know, obviously that's the right thing to do, you know, from a moral standpoint. It's the right thing to elevate those voices, because those are the ones that, you know, matter on an issue like this. You know, they're the ones who know what the harm of nuclear weapons has been, could be for the rest of us. So they make the issue, especially with nuclear weapons, they make the issue less abstract. You know, nuclear weapons, the way that it's discussed, you know, I remember when I was in high school, even, and you know, the way you see it discussed in the media is quite sanitized. It's quite sterile. You know, it's not. You don't necessarily hear the voices of those people who've actually suffered from nuclear weapons up front. You hear, you know, this discourse about how, you know, they are. I mean, just today, for example, we heard the Secretary General. It might have been yesterday. The Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg. He said, the purpose of NATO's nuclear weapons is not to provoke a conflict, but to preserve peace, deter aggression, and prevent coercion. You know, and they'd have you believe that nuclear weapons are the kind of ultimate preserver of peace in the world. You know, that they're not even weapons. They're just kind of these mythical, you know, objects that magically keep states from fighting each other. And, you know, that kind of really, once, you know, it's easy to understand how people, you know, start to feel that nuclear weapons, the issue is so far away and difficult to engage with, if that's the discourse that's being, you know, that's the narrative that's being pushed out there constantly. And once you hear someone like Setsuko Thurlow speaking, and, you know, other hibakusha from Japan, and also, you know, the survivors of nuclear testing, whether it be Kazakhstan or the Pacific Islands, places like Marshall Islands, Kiribati, or, you know, even the United States. There are lots of, you know, soldiers from the UK that were, you know, more or less intentionally exposed to nuclear testing, you know, in Australia as well, indigenous communities in Australia. Once you hear those kind of voices, you realize that actually, like, nuclear weapons, they're not just, you know, you can't divorce them from the impact that they have on people and people's livelihoods and their environments and their, you know, their homes. That's what really matters when we're assessing, you know, any state practice, and especially when it concerns a weapon. So that their kind of voices cuts through, you know, quite cleanly, quite completely, that narrative from the side that wants you to believe that deterrence is, you know, a viable and the only means of preserving security among great powers. You know, just like lots of other issues, you know, when we talk about, you know, security among states, you know, it's always disenfranchised, you know, communities that are kind of, you know, ignored or forgotten. So it's so important to hear the voices of survivors to kind of cut through that. They are the most powerful and the most effective, you know, arguers against the status quo. And I think one other thing that I think makes Setsuko and others like her that you hear today so poignant and so powerful in how they resonate with young people is obviously that they were young themselves when they experienced this. You know, it's hard for us to imagine what that would have been like. And their voices, you know, they saw this harm, this devastation through you know, young people's eyes. You know, they saw it when, you know, Setsuko Thurlow was 13. when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. And so the way they explain it and the way their memories come forth are, with those kind of eyes and that perspective of, how could, what is causing this, because obviously you don't know about the, international conflict or the tensions that's happening around you, just in total innocence of that situation. So I think certainly I think for me anyway, not that I'm that young anymore, but when I first heard the story, I think that's what really resonated for me. It forces you to think of, like, my gosh, what would that have been like? It allows you to visualize it, and, well, not visualize it, but it allows you to kind of think about it in a different way.
No, I definitely think that is the case. Every time I speak with younger people on stalls or out and about, it's their stories that make all the difference in the discussion. We're coming up to 75 years since those attacks, so how can we go on making sure that her message and everyone else's is spread this August?
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of thinking and planning around the 75th anniversaries right now, and obviously I think for all of us, the COVID-19 crisis is kind of throwing a lot of plans and imagining what's possible into flux. But I think it's so really important that we don't let this this anniversary go past, because it's 75 years is quite significant, and I think what you hear from many of the survivors communities themselves is that this is going to be most likely the last major anniversary where we have those voices speaking firsthand in person. With the passage of time, we're going to lose many of those voices to history, and so we can't postpone the 75th anniversary like you could with a sporting event or something like that. You can't postpone this incredible crucial anniversary to another year or another time. We have to go ahead and we have to be creative with how we do the commemorations. So what we're thinking right now is, obviously, like a lot of things, is to move things online and to be able to, share testimonies. It doesn't replace, actually being in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but it can, preserving these testimonies digitally as well, and sharing those as wide as possible. So we will, in ICANN, we're working on recording some testimonies, putting them up on the web page, sharing that as widely as possible, and also using that message from the Hibakusha community, making sure that we put that front and center, as we were just talking about in our work, to get other sub-state actors to recognize the commemorations as well in their own way. So we really want the cities and towns that have already signed the city's appeal to issue statements on those days of talking about. I think it's really important for cities, because they should stand in solidarity with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Nuclear weapons are, they're designed to be city destroyers. So I think it's, as the motivation for the city's appeal says quite clearly, is that this is an obligation for cities to speak out on this issue, and I think it should also be an obligation for cities to stand up and speak out in solidarity with Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and 9th. So obviously, the flip side of that is getting more cities and states, cities and local authorities, cities and towns to sign on those dates, either in the run-up to it or on August 6th and 9th, and making that connection to the 75th anniversary. Similarly, I think we can get financial institutions to issue statements. They're quite keen to use social media to celebrate their work that they do on other worthy causes, and I think we should absolutely expect them to speak out on this anniversary as well. And they might, unfortunately, the nuclear weapons issue is portrayed as being very political, and something that some entities don't want to get involved with. But I think that's, when we're talking about commemorating this massive tragedy 75 years ago, and we're talking about recognizing the voices of the surviving Hiroshima today, I think it's not acceptable to not recognize it in some way. So yeah, we have to be crafty, and I think we have to share a lot of ideas on how we're going to make sure that this that the commemorations on the 75th anniversary kind of break through and don't get lost in the noise of other issues that are happening, because I think this is it's really crucial. So we're doing our own kind of planning here, but we obviously would love to hear from others in Scotland and around the world about what they're thinking about doing for August 6th and 9th, and seeing if we can share those ideas with others and inspire each other.
Oh, well, that was amazing, Daniel. Thank you so much for all of your fantastic input this afternoon. I'm sure all of our members and supporters will feel that Scotland really does have a place with our friends across the world, and we'll make sure to get creative in spreading Setsuko and everyone else's message, and we'll continue preparing for entry into force.